What's going on, guys? Just throwing together a quick update video. I had a bunch of people ask me to make a video today, so I wasn't doing anything right now, so I said, fuck it, I'll make a video. Nothing has changed. Everything looks great. And with that being said, let's jump into the video. It's going to be a lot of repetitiveness, all the charts that I normally show, and they're updated now. We're going to start with the macro and AMC. Once again, you have a downtrend from 2017 until you break out January 2021. Comparable to this here, your macro fractal break this gap down, comparable to this, the W that you play out sideways on both sides. And then you get into the downtrend 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, before dropping to the flat portion here where you have 3 touches on the bottom, 1, 2, 3, comparably to this, 1, 2, 3. From your third touch, you form an uptrend, breaks you out of the triangle, and a straight line to the squeeze from there. So the macro on AMC is perfect. The daily EMAs, and what we're doing now for every chart that I'm showing you here on out, let me just double check. Yeah, every chart that I'm showing you from here on out, we're looking at the flat portion right here. This 1, 2, and 3, this flat portion that led up to the squeeze January 2021. We're looking at that compared to the flat portion of the current cycle over here. So we're just going to be comparing this to this. This flat portion that led up to the squeeze. So that's what we're comparing this to now. Again, the flat portion of the current cycle is playing out on top of the previous flat portion here as support now. So this is playing out the exact same way that it played out leading up to the January squeeze here. It's playing out the same way right on top of it as support now. So, jumping into this, the daily EMAs first. January on the left, current cycle on the right. So I mentioned this for the past month now, that the next time the 20 EMA crosses the 50 to the upside, we will be squeezing or in the middle of our squeeze. And I stand by that. It looks great. No complaints whatsoever. The EMAs on the daily are the same. The 20 EMAs in the white, the 50 is in the green. 20 is under the 50, crosses it, comes underneath, crosses it higher, and over here, same thing. Comes back underneath, crosses it higher, and then crosses the 50 to the downside again. Over here, you cross one more time in the tri-peak, as you do here. And then you come underneath, and over here, same thing, and that's where you find your third bottom. You find the uptrend off of your third bottom where you're fighting for the 20 EMA, as you see it here. Before you gap over the 20 EMA, you gap over the 50 EMA, and then you come back down to retest pretty much at the 50 EMA, like where the 20 is meeting the 50 here. You're just retesting here, and that's exactly what we have here. Gapped over the 20, gapped over the 50, has now come back down and bouncing on top of the 20 and 50 EMA as support. And the 20 EMA is now 1 penny away from crossing the 50 to the upside. So this looks very good. Now, having said that, that does not mean, because more likely than not, the 20 will be crossing the 50 sometime this week. That does not mean that you're just going to see a straight line to 140 the second the 20 crosses the 50. What that does mean is that we're checking off one more thing off the checklist that we're looking for. There's only a few more things that we need. Number 1 is this retest to confirm, which it's almost there. Number 2 is the 20 EMA to cross the 50. And number 3, the final gap up that we're looking for right here. Having said that, let's get into the daily gaps now. Mentioned this multiple times as well. Again, January on the left, current cycle on the right. All of the gaps are the same on both cycles. There's even more gaps that aren't labeled here just because there would be flags all over the place. The gaps are all the same. So you have the 3 white here in a row. You have the 2 green as you see it here. You have 2 gaps down in the final iteration as you see it here, 1, 2. And then you get your second bottom from that second gap, and then you find a gap up as you do here into the tri-peak. And then from the third peak of the tri-peak, you come down one final gap down to your third bottom as you see it here. From the third peak of the tri-peak, one final gap down to the third bottom. And then you find your third bottom in the uptrend, as we did. Again, this is where you were fighting for the 20 EMA before getting the gap up here. This blue flag, been talking about this for the past month, as we spent a month down here, by the way. Very slow, choppy uptrend. And I said we would be there until we found this blue flag here, this gap up, and that is a breakout. From the top there, you come down and you retest on top of the previous range, which is exactly what we're doing now. So this looks very good. Once this retest confirms, the next thing we're looking for is another gap up. This yellow flag here, comparable to this. That's the next thing we're looking for. And more likely than not, the way this is going to play out, as I mentioned with the previous gap up, is that this gap is going to be on a Friday or a Monday, after hours or pre-market on Court News. And the court news this time around will be Zern signing the paper, the decision for whatever the fuck they're talking about in court. I have no idea. Don't care either. So that's that. The RSI, I have not updated this. It's about a day or two old, but it doesn't matter. It's the same. Covered this multiple times. Again, January on the left, current cycle on the right, all three of your bottoms, and then the RSI underneath. So in the yellow, one break below, two breaks above. Over here, same thing. One break below, two breaks above. Purple, second break below, third break above. Over here, same thing. Second break below, third break above. The red, you get your third break below, as you see it here. From there, you bounce up, and then you break below one more time at the beginning of the green. It's also the second bottom. Over here, same thing. Where was it? You bounce up, and then you come down at the beginning of the green. Again, the second bottom. So it lines up perfectly. From that point, you get to the tri-peak, where you have these two breaks above, 4 and 5, comparable to this right here, 4 and 5. And then you get your final break below oversold in the blue. Before you bounce up, you get this W move. Again, that would have been the equivalent of this move here, this pop and this pullback, this W move. That would have been this pop and this pullback, comparable to this pop and this pullback here, would have been right here. And then your sixth break above overbought is the breakout. Lines up perfectly with the breakout. And then from there, you dip back below overbought, as we're seeing now, the pullback from the breakout. So again, along with the EMAs and the gaps, the RSI is also confirming you are here. Right here is where we are, the breakout and then the retest. Looking for the confirmation. From there is another gap up, and then from there, a straight line. This is the last pullback on AMC that we're seeing right now. When this retest of this breakout confirms, we're going to gap higher, and from that gap, there is no more pulling back. That's the end of the story. That is your macro fractal break. The macro is over at that point. The next gap up, the macro is over. Next gap up is a straight line into the squeeze. So that is that. Now, covered this a couple times as well. The macro support and resistance on AMC. This is about 10 months of price action on AMC is what we're looking at right now on the daily. You have this macro downtrend up top, this macro resistance. Perfect rejection here, perfect rejection here. Poke through here. We got halted though, which makes perfect sense. I mentioned previously the halts are not malicious. It's just to make sure the algo runs its course correctly, runs out the macro correctly. So halted here, a perfect rejection here. Didn't quite make it up to resistance here, but a rejection there nonetheless. And then on the bottom, you have this uptrend where all three of your bottoms on the daily are forming higher lows. Your third bottom, very slow, choppy uptrend as support was meeting resistance, very tight range. Before we got the gap up that I was looking for on court news on Friday, just like I said. And then from there, I said we're going to pull back now to retest, and that's what we're doing now. And this was pretty much the entire week last week. This was the Monday candle, and then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, the whole entire week, establishing support on the previous resistance. So the previous resistance, macro resistance here, now acting as support. You have come down from the breakout, double bottomed 452 very nicely, closed the week on a hammer candle here, found a very nice bounce on Monday, and then today another a higher high than we saw on Monday, and closed on a gravestone doji, which is a bearish candle. Now, again, with the volume here, increasing volume on the breakout, decreasing volume on the pullback, looks perfect. Very technically sound move, a perfect breakout, a perfect retest. That's that. Now, what we're looking at here now is the flat pattern of, once again, the flat pattern of the January cycle up top and the flat pattern of the current cycle on the bottom. Starting with the W here where you find your first bottom on both sides. Very choppy down here as you saw it here. 5 peaks in increasing height, the white dots, and the same thing here. In the current cycle, this played out much faster than it did here, but nonetheless, the same movement, same EMAs, same gaps. Like I said, there's more gaps that are here that I didn't label just because there would be flags everywhere. Like there's a gap here that I don't have labeled on my daily gaps chart right there. There's more gaps that aren't labeled, but they're all the same. Anyways, from the 5th peak here, you get into your final iteration of AMC. The W with the tri-peak, as you see it here. And over here, same thing, the W with the tri-peak. So you come down to your first bottom. You have this move in the green that plays out before you come down to your first bottom. Again, you gap down there to get to the first bottom in the final iteration. You gap up from there as well into your tri-peak. You gapped up here and you gapped up here. Get into the tri-peak, the blue dots now, as you see it here. And then from the third peak of the tri-peak, you break below one more time, as you see it here. Chopping, fighting for this range, as you see it here, before you get the gap up right here that we were looking for, the breakout. So the gap up right here, the breakout, and now coming down to retest. Not only did it bounce perfectly off of that triangle on the macro support resistance in the last slide I showed you, but on top of that, it bounced perfectly off of the previous range we were fighting for. So for a month straight, trying to break 450, absolutely could not do it until we finally found the gap up on the court news. Like I said, got the gap up, very exaggerated move, by the way. And then come back down for the retest, bounced perfectly off the previous range, found a bounce off, as well as bouncing perfectly off the triangle as well. So all these rejections, like I said, previous resistance, now acting as support. Not only did it bounce perfectly off the triangle, but it bounced perfectly off the top of the previous range. So this looks very good. Now, zooming in on this now, I don't even know why. I just showed this in my last slide. This is just zoomed in on the final iteration here. So the move in the green, the first bottom, the tri-peak, move in the green, the first bottom, the tri-peak, break below after the third peak, as you see it here, fighting for that resistance at 450. As you see here, you get the gap up and then the retest on top of the previous range, which is where we are now. Like I said previously, once this breakout, this retest confirms, the next move we're getting is a gap up, and that is it. This is the final pullback we're seeing on AMC right now. Once this retest confirms, we're gapping up, and that gap up from there, that's sayonara, that's it. There's no more pulling back. That's the end of the macro. The next gap up is the end of the macro, a straight line into your squeeze from there. So that's what we're looking at right now. Now, for the retest, and before I even say this, the only variable here is time. A lot of people like to get annoyed with me making a call out and then we don't get it on that exact day. The only variable here with time, the next move is up. That's not to say, I have two scenarios here where we could possibly come down to double bottom this move. As you see it here, this breakout, you have your gap, right? So you come to the top and you play more or less a W, then confirm, and you get the bounce off and the gap up. So it's possible, since we got the gap here, you come down, bounce, bounced up. It's possible you come back down to double bottom this move. I would imagine it would be slightly higher as you see it up here. And then that is the confirmation, and then you get a very nice bounce off of that. That will take us to our gap. Again, the gap is going to be on court news. It's going to be on Zern signing whatever paper she's signing, and that's that. There's also a scenario where the bottom's in. Well, actually, the bottom would be in either scenario. But it's also possible we're not coming back down, and we're just going to have a very slow, choppy uptrend to the upside for the rest of the week. And then potentially Friday, after hours, we get the news from Zern. Regardless, the next move is up. Whether we're chopping here for the rest of the week, whether we get it tomorrow, I don't think we're getting it tomorrow, but whether we're chopping here the rest of the week or not, the next move we're getting, once this retest confirms here, is up. A gap up, and that is it. That is the end of the macro, the end of the story for AMC. At the same time, I'm not going over GameStop today, but at the same time, GameStop's macro looks perfect. It looks like it's ready for its macro breakout. Has been very red as of late, but it's on low volume, and the macro is perfect. The next move GameStop is getting is a gap up as well, assuming that GameStop's macro break is going to be very exaggerated, as we saw with AMC. And like I previously mentioned, the exaggeration here we're seeing with this move, what that says to me is that the next macro on AMC that we're going to be seeing is going to be much larger than the previous. And what I mean by that is that, so this macro right here, this current macro that we're in is bigger than this one. This is your all-time highs on AMC. It's a bigger macro than the previous. The next macro that we're going to get is going to be much larger than this one. What does that mean? The price targets will be much higher. So that's all this is saying to me. I've seen some people say that, oh, potentially this is the January squeeze here. No. Just no. Not even close. So I thought I would clear that up. The answer is no. It's not. And that's pretty much it for the video. I just want to say something really quick too. To the people who are still on a daily basis checking failure to delivers, FTDs, checking the threshold list, checking cost to borrow, checking the short interest, checking the news, talking about, oh my God, AMC best revenue, whatever the fuck that we've seen in 100+ years. Stop. It's a waste of your time. I promise you, none of that shit matters. I promise you, none of it matters at all. It's all fake. Everything you're seeing here, it's not real. None of those numbers matter. The only thing matters is that the algo is algoing. Fractals are fractaling. We're running on a loop. That's it. That's all you have to know. And the next move that we're getting is up. A gap up and a squeeze. That's what's next. Whether it's this week, whether it's next week, whether it's the end of August, I don't know. I'm not a prophet. I'm not a psychic. Can't tell you the exact day. What I can do is continue to track the macro, which is tracking perfectly, and tell you the next move that we're going to see is another gap up, and that gap up will be taking us a straight line into our squeeze. And more likely than not, that gap up will be on the court news, Zern signing the paper. So all that bullshit, FTDs and all that fucking nonsense, just stop paying attention to it. It's a waste of your time. I promise you that. That being said, I'm live for the rest of the week. I will be live tomorrow as well as the rest of the week. I'm not sure if I'm going to be making update videos for the rest of the week. Depends on the price action. And that is it. I'll catch you guys tomorrow.